Test, test. There we go. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to have everybody come up to the center in the front because we have a small group today. Center in the front. So for those of you that are online, welcome. I know we've got a small group that is joining us today virtually, and then we also have many of us that are here in person. I'm so thankful. I'm just trying to bring my notes up here. All of a sudden I had everything going and it's crashing, so we may be doing this from memory. But give me just a second. I am glad that we are here, and here we go. Okay, so my apologies. Welcome to the C-Suite for Christ event sponsored by Trissential. I know I have met many of you this morning, and we've got a number of you that this is your first time here. And so I'm so thankful for you joining us. If you want to know a little bit more about C-Suite for Christ, come see me afterwards. I can tell you all that you will be getting into when you join and become a member. This is just an example of some of the events that we are doing. I'm Sarah Junio, and I have the honor and the privilege to serve today as your MC and the moderator for the panel that we are going to be having today. I'm a longtime member of C-Suite for Christ. I joined in 2018, and I am also an employee of Trissential. And Trissential is our sponsor today. You're going to hear a little bit more about them. But I'd like to thank them and also Westwood Church for hosting us. We would not be here today if it weren't for them. So thank you to Westwood and thank you for Trissential. We have a wonderful morning planned for you. We have some amazing leaders to talk about organizational change, transforming the workplace for Christ. And so before we begin, what I'd like to do is start off with a prayer. So if you wouldn't mind bowing your heads. Gracious and eternal God, as we gather here today, leaders, visionaries, and servants of both business and the community, we come seeking your wisdom and guidance. We represent different organizations, from those that generate profits to those that generate hope. Yet we are united in our desire to transform our workplaces with your light. Lord, open our minds to the insights that await us in today's conversations. Like the merchants and craftsmen of the biblical times, help us to see our work as a calling, a means to serve you by serving others. As we listen to our speakers and our panelists share the experiences in organizational change, grant us the discernment to recognize your hand in their stories. We pray for wisdom to see beyond the metrics and the spreadsheets to the hearts of those we lead. Courage to implement changes that align with your values, humility to learn from each other's experiences, vision to transform your organizations in ways that honor you, compassion to remember that every employee is created in your image. May this gathering be more than a mere exchange of business strategies. Let it be a communion of spirits seeking to build your kingdom through our daily work. Help us find those moments of revelation, those divine intersections where business acumen meets spiritual purpose. And Lord, we surrender this time to you, asking that your presence guide our discussions and that your spirit illuminate the path forward. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So just briefly, the sponsorship today, as I had mentioned, is through Trissential. Trissential is an organization that I started working with back in May. And once you get into the Trissential family, it is, as I've been learning from others, a very dynamic organization. And what I like about the fact that they are, the reason that they are sponsoring, one of the reasons that they are sponsoring is because their missions and values of the company complement the work of C-Suite for Christ. And we're going to hear Cindy talk about this towards the end of our presentation today. But their mission is to have a positive impact in the life of anyone who interacts with Trissential. And their core values remain at the top of that list. And when you think about how we operate as C-Suite for Christ, really making a positive impact in the workforce and with individuals, you can see how they complement each other. And so we're very excited to be able to sponsor, and I'm very excited to be in part of both organizations, C-Suite and Trissential. Now, the first order that we have is our keynote speaker. Our keynote is Eric Brooker, and he's a dynamic keynote speaker, dynamic individual with lots of personality. He's a best-selling author and a host of a globally acclaimed podcast called Council Culture. That is really hard to say very fast, so slow it down. With 25 years of experience in corporate America, Eric has become a leading authority on leadership, on culture, and the power of relationship capital, which we'll learn about in a few minutes. His keynote presentations are known for their compelling insights and practical strategies drawn from extensive career and conversations with top leaders and innovators from companies like Chipotle, Campbell Soup, Reebok, and Disney, as well as former NBA and NFL athletes and best-selling authors. So we've got a star-studded keynote here. As an author in the best-selling book, You Are Enough, Eric brings a unique blend of expertise and personal experience to his talks, inspiring audiences to foster meaningful connections and build positive, inclusive workplace cultures. Today, Eric shares his insights on the crucial role of relationship capital, building a security-first culture, and how leaders can effectively drive organizational change. Now, before we bring up Eric, do you have a clicker yet? Perfect. Okay. After we hear from Eric, I'm going to introduce our panelists, but I'm going to also ask you to think through as you're listening to Eric's presentation before we get to the panelists. If you have any questions, we want this to be an interactive, engaging conversation. And for those that are online, you're welcome to type your questions in the chat and we will get them to the panelists. And that's going to be part of our interactive discussion, as well as some of the questions that we've already pre-planned, just in case you weren't a talkative group. But I am not afraid of that happening. So with that ado, Eric, I'm going to have you come on up to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. You guys are a lively bunch. Who's had coffee? Who drove the furthest this morning? I did. Well, it wasn't me. I'm in Woodbury's. Anybody? Where are you at? Okay, so you drove quite a bit. Okay, so we're almost neighbors, kind of. But just River. Did you leave this morning? Oh, you left far earlier than I did. So, about a year ago, I was asked to give a talk, and it was tied to the book that I had just published, and I had never spoken on a topic related to the book, which is strange that I wrote the book. And I sat there for a little while questioning, what am I gonna talk about in a corporate setting that basically talks about doing unto others the way, well, you guys know how it goes. And it was a really unique opportunity in a corporate environment to have this conversation. And it seems every iteration of relationship capital changes a little bit. Today, we're going to talk about transforming the workplace, but I get to have a conversation that I'm very comfortable with, in that we're having more of a church conversation. It's more related to really what our call is. This is actually something I added to the deck not that long ago, but there are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind. I think it's an important message for us. I did this as a joke to someone in the audience that was a big C.S. Lewis fan, and I thought, I think I'm going to leave it here, because as we got up this morning, got out of bed, all of a sudden we had this realization that yesterday's problems are still here, and they might not go away tomorrow, but God is bigger than all of this. And at the end, when it matters, we're all better on the other side. If you want a copy of the presentation, you can grab the QR code, or you can find me after, and I'm more than happy to get you a copy of it. If you don't, I'm going to move on. If you don't have it yet, hold on. We got one more grabbing it, I think. Oh, there's always one. Um, when I started doing keynote presentations, I really started studying through the podcast that I had hosted other keynote presenters. And the one thing that I felt the ones that did a great job drew me in right away. They drew me in because I got to know them on a personal level. The ones that I was like, wow, I was like that was a good keynote, but it's not going to change the world. I really didn't get to know them on a personal level. The other reason I get to introduce you to my family is because I'm standing here with the mic and I can. So my wife and I have been married almost 20 years. We have 7 kids. Um, live in Woodbury, grew up in Phoenix. So many of you are probably questioning what, yeah, polar opposite. We needed a change. Actually, truth, I until last year, yes. It took us about 12 years. The reality of it is we moved here because we wanted to raise our kids differently. We wanted to raise our kids with more intention. We were raising a first generation of Christian kids. My wife will call her a convert. I'm a convert. I grew up Jewish, came into the church in 1997, and I love my parents. I had an hour-long conversation with my dad yesterday, but we don't see eye to eye on a whole lot of things, which is impressive that we managed to have an hour-long conversation. Some of you seen this before. Who is this? What do we know about him? Great swimmer. You stole my thunder. Say it. Say it louder. Do we know that? Does everybody know that? You know why you know that? Do you know why he was public about it? I'm sure he's a really nice guy. There was a marketing opportunity. He suffered in silence for many, many years dealing with depression. 28 gold medals. I beg your pardon, 28 medals, 19, I believe, gold. He's the winningest athlete in modern Olympic history, which I think dates back to like 1897. It would seem that Michael Phelps has everything going for him. It would seem to me, I read this morning, I was like, oh, I wonder who else suffered from mental health, trying to like add some new flavor to it. Did you know that Vincent van Gogh committed suicide? Did you? I didn't know that. It would seem that he had everything going for him. The food guy from CNN years ago, what was his name? Pardon? Anthony Bourdain committed suicide. And I'm not saying, pardon? Robin Williams. It would seem that these people have everything in their favor. They didn't have the financial troubles that maybe some of us have. They had everything in their favor, and yet they had something going on. I told a story the last time I gave a similar talk that my son and I went to Italy. My son and I spent 3 weeks in Italy. We spent 10 days with his senior class. And then he and I decided we were just going to stay for 10 days. Actually, it was my wife that suggested we stay for 10 days. And about 3 weeks before the trip, mind you, just about everything was paid for. But about 3 weeks before the trip, I lost my 2 largest clients. Is anybody an entrepreneur, own their own business? The one thing my dad taught me very, very early was don't let any one customer be more than 10, maybe 20% of your revenue. Those 2 clients were 80% of my income. My wife stays at home with our kids. I went into panic mode. I called my business partner. I said, I'm not going to go to Europe. I'm going to build the funnel. I'm going to find new clients. Now, he ended up pushing me. He ended up saying, Eric, you have to take this trip. And then what did I do? Like any good American, I went on social media for 3 solid weeks and I posted all about this amazing trip. But I never posted that I lost my 2 largest clients. I never posted that most of the rest of the trip went on the credit card, because when you're effectively unemployed or don't have income, cash is king. The cash I had on hand needed to sustain us to the other side. My buddy Joe called as soon as I got back. Man, how was the trip? It looked amazing. Said it was great. And then as the conversation continued, he got a little more and more defeated. You could hear it in his voice. I said, Joe, what's going on, man? Is everything all right? It was like he had called me so I could ask him what was going on. And you could hear the sadness in his voice. I said, Joe, what's up? He said, I'm never going to be able to take that trip. I just don't have it in me. I don't make that kind of money. I'm never going to be able to give that to my kids. And I said to him, I said, Joe, social media is not real. And yet every single one of us in this room compares ourselves to social media. Joe was comparing himself to social media. So I got real with Joe. I said, Joe, it wasn't the trip that you thought it was. Here's the debt I came back with. Here are the challenges that I face coming back. I've not picked up the phone and called a prospective client in almost a month, and I have no money coming in. Here's a story I haven't shared before. We're there, we're 3 weeks in. It's the last day. We're in Rome. We've got an Airbnb. Tension is high. And my now 18-year-old, 17 at the time, said some choice words to his dad and walked away. And when I say walked away, like, I have no idea where he went. I wasn't going to chase him. So I pick up the phone and I call my wife and I said, everything's fine. Owen's got his phone. He knows how to get back to the Airbnb. I'm not going to chase him. Now, my wife's thousands of miles away. You can imagine how, honey, everything's fine. I have no idea. I may have lost your son in Europe. But life isn't easy, and yet we compare ourselves to all the things on social media. Who's got kids? I'm raising my hand, but who else's kids have social media? Keep your hands up if your kids have social media. Put your hand down if you regret giving your kid access to social media. Put it down, yeah. Social media is a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us. And for me, and I think a lot of us, social media became this issue where we had separated our business relationships from our personal relationships. Personal relationships went on Facebook, and then everything else went on LinkedIn. And then all of a sudden, Patrick sent me a Facebook request. Well, Patrick owns a $300 million a year company, and we've gone to lunch a couple of times. So maybe he considers me a friend. And then all of a sudden, everyone at Patrick's company friended me on Facebook. And now Facebook is sort of an extension of my LinkedIn account. And we're all comparing. It's the strangest thing in the world. And yet we're all comparing ourselves to those things that happen on social media. Meanwhile, we're in the middle of November. We're starting to have the conversation about New Year's resolutions. We're going to lose weight. We're going to exercise more. About 4 months ago, my son and I went on a weight loss journey. We were going to drop 10 pounds. He didn't need to. I did. I got on the scale this morning. I'm 1/10 of a pound down from where we started. That, but my birthday was the other day, and last night my 16-year-old daughter was kind of sassy, so we ended up at Cold Stone. The ice cream was really good too. So we're all setting out to be on social media less, to drop some weight, to exercise more, to do all the things. The problem is that reality starts to set in. The challenges of daily life hit us. I ran into traffic this morning. I've been on stage for 5 minutes. I've been here for 7. Someone got a flat tire. Someone's car wouldn't start. Someone in this room in the next couple of weeks is going to get a diagnosis or hear about a diagnosis of a family member. Someone's going through a divorce. Someone can't pay their bills. Someone's not happy in their marriage. All of that stuff starts to derail us. That if anything, we're lucky to weigh the same at the end of next year that we do right now because of the stress and the anxiety. The reality of it is we're all going through something. And I used to have this deck, this PowerPoint used to just be that guy. And I would talk about all the negative things that a lot of us are going through. But the reality of it is that while a lot of us are suffering some negative things, there's a lot of really exciting things going on in this room, just the same. Pregnancy, birth, grandparents, new house, all of the things. We're all going through something. Now let's pull all of this back to the work conversation for just a minute. Who goes into an office at least once a week? What's the most common question you're asked in the office? Say that louder. How was your day? How are you? Good morning. How are things? How was the weekend? How do you answer those questions? It was good. How was yours? I'm going to ask another question on the home front. Does anybody know? No cheating, Susan. Does anybody know the average amount of time we look our kids in the eyes? For those of you that have kids at home, what's the average amount of time we look our kids in the eyes each day? It is less than 5 minutes. 30 seconds. No, because 2 of them are out of the house. I didn't read the why, but any guesses as to maybe what are your thoughts on why we don't? Go ahead. I think this is the answer. I think that we're so focused on multitasking, which by the way, doesn't exist. We're all focused on multitasking. Well, Susan, how are you doing? I'm going to not tell you, but I'm scrolling Instagram right now because I want to see what happened to my friend Joe, or LinkedIn, or CNN, or Fox News, I'm just going to look for a second. And then all this, I think my kids call it doom scrolling. We do that at work too. And we justify it under the premise of I have to multitask during our one-on-one. It's just an email. You just reminded me that I needed to send Susan an email. I'm going to do that right now. But while you're talking, I'm not listening because I'm writing the email. We've got to be more present in the office. Transformational change doesn't happen when we don't have relationship capital with the people around us. I sat and gave a very similar version of this talk to Amazon yesterday, and it was fascinating talking to them after about just how much they have on their plate, but how they work to silo what it is that they're doing so they can be present. Because our one-on-ones with our team, oftentimes they're on Zoom, just by nature of the post-COVID world that we live in. But then if you're anything like me, that gives me all the flexibility in the world to check CNN, to check Fox News, to check LinkedIn, to text a buddy, because it looks like I'm looking in the camera. But Joe on the other side knows I'm not present. I know Joe's not present. We're saying all the right things for 30 to 45 minutes. Had someone ask me yesterday after my talk, what if I don't have a need for the one-on-one? I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, we meet every Tuesday. What if I don't need to meet with him? What if everything's checked off? KPIs are good, OKRs are good, the TPS report was turned in, all that stuff's done. And I said, what do you think? He goes, I just don't see a reason to meet. I said, that's the most important meeting you're going to have all week, is that meeting where there's no agenda. And this is where I believe transformational change really starts to happen. You send If it's on Zoom because they live in a different state, send them a $10 Starbucks gift card. Hey, we're going to start in a half hour. Go get yourself a cup of coffee. It's $10. You've got a team of 6. It's $60 a month for that one meeting where it's more personal than it is anything. If it's over lunch, send them a $50 Uber Eats gift card. Hey, order something in. We don't have much to cover today, but I'd like to just do a check-in and see how things are going. The challenge for all of us for transformational change to happen is that we've got to be present because people are oozing to share this information because their spouse isn't listening, their friends aren't listening. Meanwhile, we just walked by and said, "Hey, good morning. How are you?" And they responded, "I'm good. How are you?" And I responded, "I'm good." And I'm not. And they're not, because everyone's going through something. Anyone not from Minnesota? So I'm going to have a couple friends when I'm done with this part. How would you describe Minnesota nice?
Passive aggressive. It is.
Say that again.
Yeah. Passive aggressive.
So I looked it up on my way in this morning. Minnesota nice is a cultural stereotype applied to the behavior of people from the Midwest, implying residents are unusually courteous, reserved, mild manner, and passive aggressive. When I first moved here, this is what I thought of Minnesota nice. It felt like I was in some war with I just asked how you are. I don't want to come over for dinner. Let's just have a real conversation. I moved here 12 years ago from Phoenix, and one of the most challenging things I've encountered in my 12 years here is this idea of people being passive aggressive. But it's made worse by our cell phones. It's made worse by multitasking. It's made worse by us trying to do multiple things at once and not build relationship capital with one another. But if we build relationship capital with one another, all of a sudden our lives can be transformed. All of a sudden our businesses can be transformed because we have the credits in the bank through that relationship capital to have tough conversations. Anyone ever fired someone before? Worst feeling ever, right? You agonize about it for a couple weeks, you second guess yourself. Has anyone, I'll raise my hand, ever fired someone that didn't see it coming? I'm going to say for myself, and I believe for you, if you reflect, you failed as a leader. There's things you could have done differently to let them know it was coming. A performance improvement plan with a clear line of, if you don't do A, B, and C, this is what's going to happen. But if we don't build relationship capital with people, we're not going to know what's going on in their lives. I know for me, I had to terminate someone. He saw it coming. I put him on a performance plan. I was very clear. What I didn't have was any relationship capital with him to understand the suffering he was going through that led to his lack of work, his lack of focus. We go through the day to day. We make these big sweeping changes in our businesses, and we don't tell anybody the why behind it. We don't have the relationship capital to say, Susan's got a lot going on this week. I don't think this is the week to have the conversation. Eric's got a lot going on personally. I don't think he's the person to take on that project. It's not a knock on Susan. It's not a knock on Eric. It's a reflection that you've built enough rapport with them. Now, they're not all going to tell you everything that's going on. So many people, I end this talk and so many people are like, yeah, but that's not in me to have that conversation. It's not in me to see how they're doing and really get past that fatty layer of I'm fine, how are you? But the culture in your business, the culture in my business is not the crap that we write on the walls or whatever's on our website that says this is who we are, this is what we stand for. What it is the way that every single person in the business interacts with one another, internally and externally, clients and your internal customers, your coworkers. The culture of a business is not taco trucks. It's not donuts in the break room. It's not shuffleboard. It's how we treat people. Worse yet, we've all worked there where the values of your company are splashed on the wall and you're having a conversation on the side saying, that's not who we are at all. I did a consulting project for a company about a year ago. We went to breakfast. He had already hired me. This was a new client. He described his culture over breakfast, and I thought, well, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is going to be a perfect project for me. And then we get to the office after breakfast, and he pulls in the spot that says, reserved for the CEO. And I said, Dan, I need you to take the sign down. He said, what? I said, you just mentioned 5 minutes ago, any coaching, you're open to all of it. I said, I need you to take the sign down. He said, why would I take the sign down? It's my parking spot. I said, what time do you get in every day? He goes, about 9 o'clock. I said, what time does everybody else get in? He goes, the crew shows up about 7. I said, I need you to move your car to the back and remove the sign for you and the co-founder. And he just looked at me. He's like, okay, well, this is ridiculous. What do you think happened 5 minutes later? We're sitting in his office and Sean walked in. Sean's with the 7 a.m. crew. Hey, boss, those signs come down. Dan says, what signs? Goes, the reserved for CEO sign and the reserved for Rob sign. Are those down? Can we park there? And he goes, yeah. Sean says, well, it's about time. And he just walked out. But you can start to see, as I've written in my book, the little things don't mean a lot. The little things mean absolutely everything. And whether it's taking the sign down or leaving your phone in your pocket or not opening up Outlook when you're on a Teams call or being present when you're in a meeting, taking notes. One of the hardest things for me to do is to take notes on a piece of paper. All my notes are digital. I so badly want one of those. All of my notes are digital. But when I walk into a meeting, I look like I'm checking my email. I can't do that. We can't do that. We owe it to the people around us to establish more relationship. This is my oldest daughter. We'll call her Abby. Abby's 24. She lives in Fairfax, Virginia. I have a granddaughter that was born March of last year. When I say we're all going through something, I've not seen my daughter in almost 8 years. I've not spoken to my daughter in almost 8 years. I've got a granddaughter. I don't know her name. And I don't know the day she was born. My wife hasn't spoken to her. My kids haven't spoken to her. I talked to my dad yesterday about her. He hasn't spoken to her in 8 years. Kind of fell off the face of the earth. I spent 4 solid years not telling anybody. It was my wife and I's deep, dark secret. You would ask me, how's your daughter? I'd say she's fine. And that was okay, because that's the way society works. I don't know you. You would ask me, are you married? Do you have any kids? Married 7 kids. And everybody goes to the oldest child. How old is your oldest? 24. What is she doing? She's going to college. Where is she going? It really got old because I had no idea. But she lived near Skidmore College in Ballston Spa, New York. So she went to Skidmore College. And then the last question you would ask is, what is she studying? Skidmore is a liberal arts college. She's studying liberal arts. And about 4 years ago, my wife and I were out with a couple we didn't know, sort of a double date, met through church or something like that. And the questions started. And I was done. How old are your kids? 22 to 5 or whatever they were. What's your oldest daughter doing? I have no idea. And it felt so freeing to share what was going on. The fear of judgment was so high. I was so worried about what other people might think. And he responded, I haven't talked to my dad in 20 years. I totally get it. Someone in this room is going to walk up to me after and share their version of my story. And it normally starts like this. I haven't shared this with anybody in a long time. Or my wife's the only one that knows this. It may be alcohol. It may be an estranged relationship. It can be a diagnosis. It can be a flat tire with no money to repair or buy a new tire. Whatever it is, we're all going through something. Now, the question that I get typically is, Eric, it's not in my DNA to share the deepest and darkest. If it is, great. If it's not, what I will tell you is that vulnerability begets vulnerability. When you share with someone something of substance, they will open up. I can share with you that a year ago today, my wife and I were in the hospital. She was having a miscarriage. Nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about miscarriage. Someone in this room has had a miscarriage. The worst question I got during that entire month, how's your wife doing? I lost a baby too. Certainly her suffering was different. We're all going through something. Building relationship capital doesn't start with you walking into the office today and screaming in a corporate meeting, I'm an alcoholic, or I've had a miscarriage, or I haven't talked to my daughter in 8 years. But that's where you get when you start. And it might be something as simple as a cup of coffee. Sarah, I'm going to go run to Starbucks. Can I get you something? Sarah tells me that she would love a dark roast, and I bring her a dark roast. While I'm waiting in line, I grab my phone and I make note of it in a folder that says Sarah, dark roast. And when I get back to my office and I get to my computer, I make a note on my calendar every 6th Tuesday to go to Starbucks and buy her a dark roast. That second time I bring her a dark roast, she's going to be in awe of the fact that I remembered her drink. It doesn't take much. It's a $6 cup of coffee every 4 to 6 weeks. Hey, I was at Sarah, I'm at Starbucks. I'm going to grab that dark roast. Are you good with that? No, I already got a cup of coffee. But it's that mental check of building relationship capital. It's knowing that November 13th is the anniversary of the day that Eric and his wife had a miscarriage. And someone saying, hey, why don't you go take the afternoon with your wife today? And it's just putting it on your calendar and making a note. December 5th last year, my business partner lost his oldest child, 19 years old. I said to him the other day, hey, I noticed on your calendar December 5th wasn't blocked off. I'll block it off for you if I have to, but I don't want you working. It's making these mental notes or written notes of the events that are going on in the lives of the people around you. So when Susan goes to Disneyland with her kids, you've got that in your notes. And when she's worried about her youngest being sick, you can ask her, how was the trip? How's your youngest? He was sick when you left, right? How did he do on the tilt-a-whirl? But it's those questions that build relationship capital. So then when we throw things at people, like we're making this big sweeping change at the office, or we've just merged departments or divisions, or we're a new company or private equity, or all these things that bring uncertainty in the office, all of the sudden it's like, well, Eric's got my back anyway. Eric's saying it's going to be okay. And we've got relationship capital. Eric, I'm in. Let's go. And here's the data. Some people aren't, oh, I took it out. Some people aren't driven by relationship capital. Some people are numbers folks. If you requested this document, I will send it to you with the additional page. There is a Gallup poll survey that says when people feel empowered at work, when people are invested, when people like the person that they're working for, they work harder, they work longer, they'll do all of the things to make you, the leader, look good. That means when I'm out of the office unexpectedly, you'll put the hours in. That means on November 13th, when I say, hey, I'm going to be gone, you respond with, hey, I've got the TPS report this week. I've got you covered. Don't worry about it. People are more inclined to recommend your place as a place to work. People are more inclined to stay employed there longer. Turnover is less. Turnover is insanely costly. If you can keep an employee for 6 months longer because they feel invested, because you bought them a cup of coffee every 6 weeks, that's worth it tenfold. So if we're going to win, we got to win with teamwork. We got to build relationship capital, and we have to assume positive intent. Certainly people can lose that positive intent piece. If you show up late one day, I'm going to assume you meant to be here on time. If you show up at 9:30 every morning, we're going to have a conversation. But we have to have the conversation and build relationship capital before I've got to put stuff in the bank before I can take stuff out of the bank. If I don't put anything in the bank, me looking at you saying, hey, how is it that you couldn't get here at 9:30 or at 8? The workday starts at 8. That's when you mentally say, well, I better find a new job. It's time I look for a new job. Everyone around us, this is the title of my book, everyone around us is just that. They are enough just as they are. They were made in the image and likeness of God, just like we were, even those that voted for the other candidate. Because when you think about it, and I hadn't thought about it until this morning, I think Tim Walz is going through something right now. He's got a lot on his plate. He's got to tuck his tail. He lost. Now he's got to come back and pick himself up and hopefully be a better version of himself than he was before he left. You think Kamala Harris is going through a little something? She's going through a lot. Some of us didn't vote for her. But she was made in the image and likeness of God, just like the employee that isn't going to show up today until 9:30, just like the person you fired last week. We're all going through something. Leadership is a choice. Every one of us, whether we're the CEO or the janitor, every single one of us has the opportunity to be a leader. Culture is contagious. When you walk around like the sky is falling, you're going to create that culture inside of your office. And then you're going to wonder where it came from. If you create a positive culture, if you create a positive culture of caring well for people, watch at the office. When you start buying a cup of coffee for someone every 6 weeks, someone's going to start bringing donuts into the office. As I mentioned, donuts aren't culture, but it's a start. And then you're going to hear that Eric's out today. I'll do the TPS report. Hey, can you cover getting his CRM updated while he's out? He's got some family thing going on. And then all of a sudden, we're all working together. So when that big sweeping change comes, when that acquisition comes, or the family sells the business, or whatever it is that's going to happen, all of the sudden, we're all in it. because the business leader has done all the right things up to that point to say, yeah, I trust her. I trust him. It's going to be fine. I'm in. Let's do this. The inverse, and we've seen it in corporate America, probably seen it in our own careers, where some big sweeping changes needed. I see it a lot in the tech space right now. No relationship capital, nobody's invested, everyone's there. It's nothing more than a job. And then private equity comes in. Sorry to anybody if you're private equity. Private equity comes in, and those people that really built the business from the ground up, they all start looking for jobs. The other question I get, and then as we wrap, I'll leave it at this. What if I don't care? I have a really good friend of mine who's the CEO of I bet you, they got to be close to $1 billion in revenue. He was a founder. He has trained himself to care. And all he does is asks the right questions, and he listens really well. But for those of us that know him well, it's clear he's just going through the motions. If you don't care about the people around you, if the people around you are nothing more than metrics and data points and quota doers and all of that thing, you're probably not right for leadership. That might be the same for the people around you. If you're Susan Davin said this in wherever we were, Milwaukee. If you're treating people like human doers and not human beings, you're probably not right for leadership. That's okay, because not everybody is. But that being said, it's important that we own and embrace what leadership is. So when the opportunity arises for something transformational, for big changes in the office, that we're prepared and the people around us are prepared for it. Thank you.
Eric, thank you very much. This was, I love that presentation. You know, there's so many different things that we can talk to about organizational change, but at the end of the day, it's all about the people. The psychology of change is how people are reacting to the environment around them. We like to say we're human beings, not human doings. So when we look at transforming our organizations, you know, the equation that I always use in my workforce is 3R plus B gives you that trust. You have to have, as Eric said, that rapport with the individuals. You have to have that frame of reference. How are they coming to the table? Because you don't know what they just left at the door to come here. So rapport, reference, frame of reference, and then respect. Do you respect your employees, your team members, your colleagues to build that capital, that relationship capital? And then when you add in that sense of belonging, when you really are present and asking the questions and allowing them to feel heard, they feel that sense of belonging. They give you that discretionary effort that gives you the trust, which builds the relationship capital that Eric's talking about. So there's a lot of different things that we can look at. But what I want to do is bring up our panelists today. And while we're bringing them up, I do have a request. If you have any questions for Eric or the panelists in regards to organizational change, transforming the workforce, we're going to have that as an interactive discussion. We do have a mic in the back, so just raise your hand and we'll get that mic to you. So think about your questions. And then I'm going to ask Susan and Heidi to come up and have a seat here with me. We are going to talk a little bit about their background. So they are some dynamic individuals. Susan, if you have not met Susan, I had the opportunity to meet her for the first time today, even though we spoke on the phone. After a successful 15-year career at Apple, plus marketing leadership roles at 2 global agriculture companies, and as a COO for a behavioral health consulting company, and as an independent strategic sales and marketing company, she decided to found 2 different companies. Indie Do Good, which is providing logistics, marketing, engineering services to support entrepreneurial small and medium businesses who do good. So it'd be interesting to learn more about that. And then often she also has Auden Associates, an investment group providing seed funding and mentorship for early stage companies who do good. So a lot of connection there. She's got a wonderful story about her experience hiking the Appalachian for Parkinson's, but I'll let you talk to her about that separately. Our second panelist is Heidi. Heidi Elder is the founder of Shine Ministries, which is based in Perham, Minnesota. If I mispronounce that, you will obviously know I'm not from Minnesota. First and foremost, Heidi is a devout follower of Jesus Christ, and as a representative of King Jesus, her purpose and passion is to advance the kingdom of God by perpetuating his principles, the policies and values of every facet of life on earth through her biblical teaching, mentoring, life coaching, and promoting and the reading of God's word in every community. Even though she lives in a small community of 500 and some people, right? She is speaking all over to lots of different groups. And we welcome her today to give her perspective. And then, as I'd mentioned before, the moderator work for Trissential. Trissential has given me the opportunity to support McDonald's Corporation in the organizational change management consultant role. And I also do a lot of executive coaching on the side and also a part of the C-Suite for Christ Speakers Bureau. So I do a lot of speaking and entertaining as well. So I love being here. Thank you very much for having us. Before we begin with these two ladies with the questions that we have, are there any questions from the group or even online? If you have a question, type it into the chat and we will get that from you. So questions so far? Okay, well, that's good. That gives us more time to do some discussion here. So did you turn your mic on? Yes. Yeah. So we have Susan and Heidi next to us here. Thank you very much for joining us. So I know we talked a little bit about organizational change management and culture as we were kind of preparing for this. But the first question I have for you is, what common problems do Christian leaders face from your perspective when trying to live out their faith amidst organizational change? Because as Eric talked about, we're all going through change. We're all going through situations. And then when you add on the corporation going through changes, that's a lot to take on. And we're all coming to the table with so many different issues and challenges. What solutions have worked best when you've seen that in the workplace?
Okay. Well, the thing that pops to my mind when we talk about this is be your authentic self. And it's kind of hard, I think you would agree, to separate God from the business day. It just doesn't work that way. And sometimes that can be really hard. And sometimes it can even seem cultural to the organization. But I think that's Satan working, actually. I think to bring your authentic self and live out and be the light, is something that is positive and needed in organizations. And the more uncomfortable it feels, probably the more it's needed.
I'm just seeing disconnection, maybe the loneliness and not being heard, not being valued. So the opposite of that is bringing value to people's lives, being that good listener. And for me, the big word is being observant. As I was going through teacher training, the first thing they did in our first year was send us to the classroom and observe first. And really pay attention. And to me, it was children, but even now, as I am out and about, I'm just really observing people and trying to look at their hearts. And I really know that's what Jesus did when he walked in this earth, was really paying attention and observing. Even in the gospel, when he was calling the disciples, his team of 12, he looked at Nathanael and he said, "I saw you." And Nathaniel's like, you saw me. He said, yeah, I saw you under that tree. And now I'm asking you to come follow me. So I think that's what it's about in building a team, is first of all, looking at the value, what they can add, and knowing who they are by asking the questions and listening, and just being Jesus, you know, and bringing that light and that truth with you wherever you go.
You know, great points, because biblically we know that what is in your heart comes out of your mouth. And so if you are angry or bitter or sad, something's going on inside you. How do you reconcile what's on your heart so that you know you're speaking what is truly there? And you bring up an interesting point, Heidi. Did you all know that in 2023, the US Surgeon General said the biggest epidemic we are in right now is loneliness? It's huge.
Yeah.
And, you know, to Eric's point, how do you get people out of that loneliness? You build that relationship capital, you be present, you be authentic, you really help them, because that, if you can connect with them and be present with them, that helps them through the organizational change. That helps them advance to the next step, because they know you're looking out for them. You've got their back. And so addressing that loneliness is a huge, huge component. So thank you for bringing that up. But, you know, Eric talked about turnover. So how do you keep a faith-based culture? We're bringing in faith-based culture here when you have so much employee turnover going on. What are your thoughts around that?
What pops to my mind when you ask that question is, how many of you are dog owners? Like an inside dog, not a hunting dog that stays out in a kennel, or, you know, but an inside dog. And you talk about loneliness and, you know, the turnover and all that stuff. When I come into my house, my sweet little Eve, named because she came home on Christmas Eve, is Miss Wigglebutt. And she's so excited to see me, and her tail is going. We call it the circle wag, and she is so excited. And I think our employees are like that. And oftentimes I say to her, I see you. And I think our employees want to be seen. It's really hard. These are not easy times at all. And if I treated my employees the way I treat my dog, you know, I sit down on the step right inside the door and give her a big hug and talk to her. And, you know, is it going okay? Did daddy feed you? Where'd you poop? Because dad never picks up the poop. You know, we have these kind of conversations. And if we had, maybe not the poop conversation.
Yeah, I was gonna say, maybe not that one.
But, you know, I see you. What are you going through? And there's ways to say it. And the more you say it, the easier the conversation gets.
Yeah.
And it shows people that you genuinely care. And I think that's what's driving the loneliness.
Mhm.
We're so separate. We're behind screens. Little screens are in front of us, you know. Do you ever go out of a room without taking your phone? I mean, really? I mean, I hiked 2,200 miles and my phone was with me. I mean, we didn't have cell connection, like 60% of the trail, but it was in my pocket, which isn't really a good thing. Those electromagnetic stuff, you know, and I never put it in my right pocket because my right knee and hip were trashed. So I made sure I always put it in my left pocket. So I knew it wasn't good. And if you know there's things going on in your culture with your employees, you know, that's driving the turnover. And if you know that and you're not being the light and really helping to, you know, seeking to understand, you're not going to have a good culture. And then you add change and what all the crap going on in our world. Wow, literally, Lordy, how do we deal with that? And I'm just so glad we have Christ going with us every step of the way.
I love that. You can even ask your employees if they were fed. Maybe not if your dad fed you, but, you know, to Eric's point, it's okay to say, hey, I noticed you've been working through lunch, and you don't have to say you're a little hangry, but it's okay to say, hey, have you taken a lunch break? Can I go get you a sandwich or something if you don't feel compelled to leave your desk? It's okay to ask that. So I'm going to ask, are there any questions on the Zoom chat that we have? Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure we're all engaged. Eric, I'll get to you in a second. Go ahead. You want to use the mic though, so we can.
I think many of us may have experienced,
Thank
you know,
being nice at work and asking those questions. And then it creates an HR situation when you do have to move to a HIP plan or termination. And so how do you balance knowing more about your employees and the ones who are going to use it in a nefarious way?
Oh, that's a great question.
Well, you know, I know this is a big if, but if you're asking those questions, hopefully it won't get to termination. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the person. And so there's things, I say that are out of your control, but really as a leader, is it out of your control? And I understand that whole HR stuff, it seems like that's gotten maybe a titch out of control. And we're such a litigious society here. When I was in global roles, it really gave me a new appreciation for our culture because the other countries, we're so in it. We don't see it. It's our everyday, it's our normal. But like, especially the buds from Germany. I mean, good grief. Come on. Talk about Minnesota nice. And what they didn't know was when I was a child, German was spoken in my home because how sometimes parents will spell words. Well, my dad was a really bad speller. So, but my mom didn't know German. But then God sent my dad into the service, and he was based in Germany, and innovative do-gooder that he is, did some great stuff, and he asked his commanding officer if as a private, he could bring his wife and 1-year-old daughter to be with him in Germany, which is way against all policy. And the commanding officer agreed. So she got to learn German. So all this to say is growing up when your, brain is developing, speaking a foreign language or learning a foreign language is easy when you're little. So I retained a lot of that. I could understand what the jerkballs from Germany were saying. I never let on that I spoke German. I never spoke German. I could understand it, but I couldn't really speak it. And it was really interesting to have those kind of conversations. But what that meant was it was a different way of listening. And sometimes I didn't really like what I heard, but it was important. I knew that. And it changed my perspective. And I think just, again, being the light and going back to the way that Christ leads and shows us the way and listening to that still small voice. But we were talking about this morning. Goodness gracious, God is so dang polite. He's never going to throw it in your face. He's going to, he speaks in a still small voice. You have to lean in to listen. You have to be available to listen to that. And man, do I get bonked upside the head when I don't listen. It's bad. And it happened to me this week. I don't want that to happen, again. I need to make sure I'm focused.
I think in that change too, it's still building one another up and encouraging one another. Even if you have to let someone know, I think there is a way you can encourage them. And in a detailed manner, letting them know and giving them thanks for all that they have done. But now it's time to pass the baton and to be unapologetically bold in the workplaces. Our CEO, Paul, says, I think it's really, again, telling them that I think God may have better plans for you. God always has good plans for us. And we discussed that today from Jeremiah 29:11, that they're plans for good, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. And I think too, with that person is giving them hope. Let's give people hope despite the situation or the circumstance. I think we can speak that into their life. I guess as a life coach, that's what we do. We equip, we empower, we encourage, no matter what. So if you can do that with that purpose, with intention and being purposeful, I think that will speak as Jesus would. It would show compassion. He says, be intentional about it and be thoughtful. Be thoughtful. And yeah, I know we've talked about Minnesota nice, but sometimes it's just really being nice and letting them know and thanking them for all that they have done. And so leave them with a word of encouragement, and because it is always about valuing people and leaving them knowing that they are valued and that they have purpose and that they have been created on purpose. And I think that would be a wonderful way to send them out. You're commissioning them onto something greater and better that suits them best.
And I think to add to that, there's a lot of fear that's going on. So how do we address the fear from, as we were talking about, from a legalistic perspective, trust but verify? How do you work through the people side, knowing that we've got fear on both sides, from the corporate side, from the individual side, and addressing what is the root cause of the fear and how do we address the root cause of the fear? So
Just to kind of circle back to what you were asking about the HR issues, as a leader, I think having those conversations with HR beforehand and making sure you understand, what the process is, that, okay, is this illegal? Just really being sure before you need to be sure, make sure that, that the processes are set and that it's something that you and your HR have agreed on is best for the company, for the employee, for the other employees, and get that figured out ahead of time. Don't wait until you have to do it in the crisis situation. It's hard to be level-headed, at that
Emotionally.
point. Yeah.
Eric, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you made me think of was actually where this whole idea sort of stemmed from for me is I was going to terminate somebody, and I called HR. We had walked through it, and Susan in HR said, "Is there anything going on in his personal life?" I said, "Not that he has shared." And this is years ago. She goes, "Can I just make a quick phone call before we meet with him and just see what's going on?" She called me not knowing what was going on in my life and said, "He's not spoken to his daughter in 2 years. And everything's reached ahead with the courts and all that." And A, that brought Rudy and I together for obvious reasons. But B, it helped HR give him the tools to either find success or find another job. So it was that moment of, hey, we're going to try and give you the tools to be successful, knowing that you're under some stress, but the job still has to get done. And so we're going to kind of extend things for you. The question that I have sort of along those lines is those types of moments tend to be, I mean, I'm sure we all do. I've got an 8 o'clock, a 9 o'clock, a 10 o'clock, an 11 o'clock. And then all of a sudden Rudy walks into my office and everything stops and I have to reprioritize my day and focus on Rudy for the next 90 minutes. Is there any practical advice that you could give us in terms of how to pivot, how to manage all of that change that's maybe just hit us if we're running HR, if we're a business leader?
My thought is you put your heart and you put your time where your priorities are. And in that situation, I think my priority would be Rudy. And, all these meetings, and I do the same thing, I stack it up, and that might be a lesson too. I've started putting on my calendar prep time and follow-up time so that, and I try to really stay true to that. Oh, it's not time to go walk the dog, or it's time to grab that sandwich that I eat at my desk, but if Rudy is important, and all of our employees should be important, maybe that meeting with a potential client or, whatever. And I know priorities are going to change, but you determine your priorities and you vote with your time, So, and it's great if you're in leadership and you have, helps an admin or, a coworker that could help to reschedule or take the call on your behalf. I mean, you can be creative about some of this stuff. And even though you think only you can do it, I think I'd bust that man.
The one thing I would add, and then Heidi, I'll let you add to that, is, I've had a good coach that has taught me time blocking. You should have 30% margin in your calendar for things that come up. And there is no badge of honor in being busy. If you have 9 meetings or more a day, I'm going to question, where is your priority? Because that, going back to the signage that we had talked about earlier, if you're too busy for your employees, that sends a message. Just like you might as well put the sign back up that says CEO parking here. So just be mindful of, is there anything that you can delegate? Why are you in all those meetings? I mean, you may need to have that heart to heart with yourself and say, what's going on here that I have to be in all of these meetings? What's going on that I don't have that margin, that I can't, optics or everything, give that attention to my employees? So, great question. I'm glad you brought it up. It's a matter of how are you managing your time and how are you giving those optics to your employees? So Heidi, you want to add to that?
I have 2 words: be flexible and put some margin into your schedule. So I agree with both of you. Wonderful answers.
Great question. Any other questions? Okay, so to wrap up here, what is your number one suggestion? If we were to walk away from here today and we want one takeaway, what would that be for the companies that want to transform their organizations?
Well, I wrote down 5 P's. So it's your positioning and how you're acquiring your team. And then it's just the planning together as a team and preparing. And then I have praying together. And then as you present together, you're forming that bond. And so and I look at it again as at Jesus, is how he called the 12 disciples as his team and how he did all that. He positioned them and they were planning. He spoke, he taught, pointed the way to the kingdom. They didn't understand everything, but he taught in parables, didn't he? But he prepared them. And at the same time, he was out praying. And I think that's so beneficial, is your private time in the morning before you even go and prepare with your team and plan and are with them. And as you present, but Jesus, he came for 3 years and he was with his 12 disciples, his team, and he prepared them because he knew he was going to go away. And I think that is what a good leader is that you're preparing your team for that change, that transition, even if maybe everything isn't quite understood, but we see in the end, then they understood and then they were able to go and present the gospel, their mission. Okay. It was missional. It all should be missional. And so we should always be preparing our team for those transitions, for those changes. And changes aren't easy. I was telling Sarah about that too. I'm like, changes weren't easy for me, but you know what? It's not my will, his will be done. And that's where I am a strong-willed person. And that's where I had to be broken and say, you know what, God, your will be done and not Heidi's will. So it's looking at that, it's reflecting on how change will be brought into your life and how are you going to deal with that change and then preparing others with that change as well.
I think for me, the one thing, if I was going to, all these great suggestions, all these words of wisdom that we're hearing, I would boil it all down to communication. It's that I hear you, I see you, and really living that out. I think the power that I've learned from like Jesus' example is he was connected, and you can't be connected without hearing people and giving feedback and genuinely asking them for their help, their suggestions. I really, really, really love hiring new people because they're so fresh and green. But they're also fearful. And I really work hard to say, you're coming in with a fresh set of eyes. I really want to hear your feedback. It doesn't make a difference if you think the idea is unimportant or small. You have this newness for a period of time. And before it gets worn away, there are no sacred cows here. I want to hear your ideas. You're coming in and we're learning from your experiences. And then, so make that an ask, communicate that. Then follow it up with, listening, that's part of communications too. And one of my problems is I talk a lot, and it's hard to listen when you're talking. And so to really have an intentionality about, tell me what you see, tell me what you've heard, what are your ideas? And then like, oh, I don't know. No. I really, think about it as you're working. How do we make this better? And then, communicating it to others, the other leaders. Nobody knows your job better than you know your job. Your supervisor can't know it as well as you. Certainly a step up leader can't know it as well. If you don't empower all these wonderfully smart people that you've hired, you're shame on you. You're missing out on probably the best consultants that there are on the planet are your own people that really understand what's going on.
Right. And if you ask that question, be prepared to do something with the answer. If you ask the question and they give you their heart and you do nothing with it, you just lost that employee. So be prepared. If you're not prepared to make that change, don't ask the question, would be my advice. So I would say from the theme here, and this is again to wrap it up, I'm hearing organizational change is about caring well for your people. Listen, adapt, be a team player, build relationships, build that rapport. Because the more we can be present, the more we can be authentic, the more we can be a human being, not a human doing. That's going to help everything through any organizational change. So I want to thank you, ladies, for being up here. Thank you for the questions. I appreciate them. What I'd like to do now, you guys can head back to your seat, and I want to bring up Cindy. Cindy is from Trissential, and she's going to be providing our closing remarks in regards to a little bit more about what Trissential is all about. And then I will come back up for a closing prayer. Okay.
Wow. So many things I wrote down that I've learned. First of all, thank you for allowing Trissential to be here today. I actually was not supposed to be here. My dear friend, Jim Mose, who is our sponsor for this and involved, is with his mom as she is passing away. So think about him today. It's a wonderful thing because she knows and he knows where she's going. So that's fabulous, but that's why I'm here instead. I'll talk a little bit. I'm going to talk about the heart of Trissential first, because I think, Eric, you talked about it, that culture, right? You can put the culture things on the wall, but are you living it? So just a couple things that I wrote down. First of all, vulnerability, right? Being able to show you're vulnerable. I've seen our CEO, I've seen our leaders show their vulnerability, which gives you permission to show your own. The other thing is are they seeing your head knowledge or are they seeing your heart knowledge? Again, can they see your heart? And that's whether you're doing change or whatever you're doing, whatever your purpose is from that standpoint. I'm in a Bible study right now on Mark, and so he does talk in parables. And I think the other thing is to know what the soil is that you're sowing on. And if you don't know that, that means you don't know your people and you don't know what they're dealing with. Is it rocky soil? Is it good soil? What does that look like? And that's one of the things that I really thought about today as we were sitting here. So anyway, I had the opportunity to show my own vulnerability when I lost my husband 3 years ago. And my company is my family in so many ways. They are my extended family. And to see the support and how people step in, and I have to just say that because that's who Trissential is. That's what I've experienced. I've been there 14 years. I'm on my path to retirement, although I'm not going to retire totally. I want to continue to be an ambassador for Trissential because I believe so much in what we do. So anyway, let's see. I'm going to look at the slides because honestly, this was what Jim was supposed to talk about. But Trissential, from the standpoint, we've been in business for 21 years now, but we are also part of a larger organization over 5 years ago called Explio. So we've been through our own transitions and our own transformations, and it's all been good. And we are local here, but again, a part of a $1.5 billion organization. So the fact that we can maintain our culture and that our CEO and our leadership team has really been able to maintain that culture is a big deal from that perspective. So located here in Minneapolis, we've got an office in Milwaukee. And as Sarah said, we go all over. So she's in Chicago. She's working with McDonald's. Okay, you want to go to the next slide? Let's see what we talk about here. And again, change management. So this is just how do you get a successful adoption? So I am not the practitioner. I'm a salesperson. So I'm not going to speak from a level of expertise, but this just shares with you a little bit about some of the things that we go through and that we talk about as we talk about doing a transformation. And our theme at Trissential is improvement. We want to help people improve. We want to help companies improve. So how do you do that, right? And how do you help companies go through these changes and through these transformations? And one of the things that we talk about is project management and having that aspect of it and the importance around that. And that there's so many changes that are involved, but not necessarily all talking about the people. So it's really easy to talk about all these other things, but what about the people? What about the people side, and how do you know what those changes should be? Okay, next slide. And again, this is a framework that we follow, and it's all about how do we prepare people, how do we enable, and how does the adoption process handle? And again, we've got people within Trissential that are experts at this. One of the other things that I wrote down is a prophet is without honor in his own land. Sometimes bringing in a consultant to do and help and lead that organizational change is one of the most amazing things you can do, because you can be a part of it rather than telling people how they need to make that change. So, little pitch for consulting, but I truly believe that that's really important, is if you can bring somebody in from the outside, because they're not, they have a different level of relationship capital than you do, being a part of that. So anyway, so this is just a framework that we follow. Do we have any other slides on there? And again, some of the key components, right? Doing a readiness assessment and an impact assessment. And then again, involving people in that, having those conversations, having those interviews, and then also just trying to be compassionate about the people and the changes that they're going to feel, because they're all fearful that they're going to lose their jobs over this. So what does that look like? How do we make those improvements? And what does it look like for you going forward? Anyway, those are just some of the key components. One of the things that Jim talked about when he was going to be here, and I love it, it goes back to Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So I think that's a great place to stop. I appreciate, again, the chance to be here and the chance for Trissential to really kind of shine in some of the areas, and like we talk about our secret sauce.
So thank you very much, Cindy. This was all a last minute change as of 8 o'clock last night, I think it was. So I appreciate your flexibility as we're going through this. And we pray for Jim's mom and family. And again, that's what it's all about, right? Helping each other out. So recap and final thoughts, and then we'll close with a prayer. This is a 3-part series that Trissential has sponsored. We had our first part in September that is available on recording. If you would like to go back and listen to that, you can find that on our website. This is the second series. Our third part of this series is in Dallas in February, I think it is. Yep, February. So if anybody wants to go to the warm weather in February, that's the place to go. But it is available also online. So again, go to the website and you can register there and hear the great speakers. Get plugged in with Trissential, join C-Suite for Christ. I know we've got a lot of new people here. Again, I'm happy to help answer any questions. If you're online, we can connect that way. And then the one thing we talked a little bit about is, hopefully you got the theme that it's all about the people, connectivity with the people, and how you're building that relationship, the relationship capital, because that's going to really make your journey with them go along a lot better, more stronger for them, and so forth. So you've got the questions that are there for consideration. normally in our monthly meetings in C Street for Christ, we usually have table discussions. And so we break up into groups, but we knew today was going to be a little bit special. We knew that it was going to have a lot more impact. And so we're glad that you had the questions and the dialogue. You're welcome to stay a few minutes after and ask questions and so forth. But with that, what I'd like to do is close us out in prayer so that we can be respectful of your time and on time. So if you wouldn't mind bowing your heads with me. First of all, Lord, we just want to thank you for the wisdom shared, the connections made, the vision you've placed on our hearts today. We've heard some powerful testimony of how organizational change can reflect your transformative work in our world. And Lord, we've heard some stories today about Jim and his mom and Eric and his wife and their children and their daughters, some of the things that they're going through. And we also know that somewhere in this room, somebody is struggling and somebody is struggling with an issue that only you know. And I ask you, Lord, to speak to their hearts that they may feel that vulnerability and come out and recognize that we are all here for them. Lord, as we turn to our offices or teams, help us carry forward the insights that we gained here. Give us courage to be agents of positive change, the wisdom to lead with both conviction and compassion, and the discernment to see opportunities to honor you in our daily decisions. I ask you, Lord, to bless these leaders that are gathered here. May the seeds planted today bear fruit in our organizations, bringing glory to you, to your name through excellence in business, integrity in leadership, and genuine care for those we serve. Guide us as we implement what we've learned, always remembering that our work is an extension of your purpose for our lives. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you again for attending. Thank you for those online. And hopefully I will see you again soon.